If it was easy, anybody would do it. But it's not going to be
It's true.
easy, but you can do it. And so I take that mindset and just like, okay, what can I learn? And even if reading things or listening to a podcast about software development, if you don't understand 90% of it, well, you've at least heard it. And then the next time you hear it, like, oh yeah, I heard that before. And you kind of learn things slowly that way. I didn't go through a traditional computer science program.
How do you juggle that and also being a pilot?
App Store optimization in the iOS world, and I mean, this is a whole nother level of the business side that you have to specifically look for that.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the iOS Dev Podcast. In this episode, I got a chance to sit with Dan O'Leary. Dan is an airline pilot, iOS developer, and co-host of the Jet Fuel Devs podcast. I hope you guys enjoy the show. So how was building and releasing your first app?
That was an experiment in could I do it, and it was a stumbling process where what do I build, right? And I think with probably a lot of developers that start with little apps, like what app should I make for my first one? The first one that I did was basically a laundry timer app. Because when I started, I was doing laundry in the apartment complex, if you will, like, and I had to like time when my laundry's done. And I always hated it when I went down and was like, oh, somebody else's laundry is in here. Like, get it out of there. It's been sitting there forever. And so I did a timer app basically, which is just my idea. But that wasn't the first app I released. Although what I learned from doing that is that time is hard. Dates are hard, and getting like,
Yeah.
how many decimal places do you want? So I didn't get too far into that app before I realized like, oh, this is actually pretty hard. Yeah, some things are harder than you think. But the first app I released on the App Store was actually a brewery finder app, because in my previously I had owned and operated a small brewery in Seattle, and this is years ago. And so when I shut that down and got into software development, you again, the question is, what do I make? And so I went from what I already knew about. Okay, well, I know a little bit about the beer business. I didn't want to make a brewing app or anything, but I thought, okay, well, what are the breweries in the state? And now at the time, we had moved to Minnesota, and so I researched, how to make basically using MapKit and just hard coding all the locations of the
All
breweries
right.
in there
Yeah.
myself. And then it
Yeah.
would give you navigations, and it would show you what the closest brewery to you was at the time on a watch complication, which I thought was actually kind of cool. But the idea of it was just get me started, and I just want to get an app on the store. I don't really care what it is. So it got rejected multiple times. This is years ago, so I can't remember exactly what. But I went through, once I finally got it to release and going through the app review process, that was a whole nother level of learning. But it was cool. Hey, I did it. I got that app on
Yeah.
the store, and I shut it down. I didn't maintain it because it was a terrible way of I was just literally putting in the latitude and longitudes of all the breweries in the state. And I think now there's been so many that I couldn't possibly keep up with, obviously, with that scale.
Yeah. How many were there?
There
Do you
was
remember?
something, there was 100, there was over 100. And I'm like, oh, there was a list. There was a list of breweries in, there's some kind of organization that Craft Brewers Guild or something in the state that listed all the breweries in that guild. And so I just took that list and then Googled each one and the address and went to Lat Long and put that in. But it was over 100. I don't know what it is now. I have no idea. But yeah, it was a terrible idea. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And you said you owned like an app brewery before,
I
or not an
started
app brewery, like a
an
brewery.
actual beer brewery. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
beer
a whole
brewery.
nother podcast.
Yeah.
This is I can't remember the years. I want to say, man, 2010, 2009. I started a very tiny brewery out of my backyard garage in Seattle. It was called a Nano Brewery. In fact, the one of the tap handles is right there. I still keep. I got rid of the rest, but so I owned and operated that brewery for 3 years, and I was self-distributing around the southern Seattle area for 3 years, and then I finally I shut that down because I couldn't. The long story short, I burned out. I mean, I just couldn't maintain the lifestyle of full-time pilot and then brewing, selling, cleaning, distributing, marketing. website,
Yeah.
business, all the things associated with that business. It was too much for me to handle, and so I shut that down. I was trying to grow it, but that was actually a failure on my part where I didn't have the business sense. The brewery was supporting itself with sales, like the income and revenue, revenue and expenses and everything was balancing out, but I didn't have enough at the scale that I was, the economy of scale, I should say, to really grow the business. And so I had to make a decision. It needed to either grow or die, and I killed it. So
Yeah. Trying to run and create a business while having a full-time job is definitely and you have a family as well too, so
yes, yes, it's multiple layers, and I treat my app development. I used to say it's a hobby, but I don't really say it's a hobby anymore because I've over the past about 2 years, I've just gotten more and more serious about it. I've got 3 apps on the App Store now, none of which really make any sales, but that's also my fault. I've learned a lot about marketing, and I have a ton. I have bugs in everything, and that need to be fixing. But of course, I'm working on a new app that I think actually has some potential to make money because it has a little bit of a uniqueness. We can get into that later, but I don't really treat my software development as a hobby anymore. It started that way because of what I learned from the burnout that I had with the brewery, that I just don't want to go all in, because of the full-time job that I still have. Um, but as things go, things accelerate, and it's like, oh, I've got this other idea, or I know how to do this better. I went to Deep Dish Swift, my first software developer conference just last year. I learned a ton there, and you come out of that experience with so much enthusiasm that it's just, oh, how do you come out of an experience like that and say, oh, it's just a hobby? I'm just not that way. So it is technically a business. It doesn't make any money, but I treat it as if it did, and it's I'm very serious about it, and I really love it.
yeah, it's a side hustle then, right? is that
It's
is that
a
a better term?
I
Is
think so,
that
but
way?
yeah, calling it a side hustle, the word hustle, I think, is like, I'm not really hustling. Like, I guess I
Yeah.
am. I'm personally hustling. I'm not trying to hustle anybody else. I'm genuinely trying
Yeah.
to produce something that will benefit other people, hopefully. You know,
And how did you get into like software development?
I was always interested in computers. In junior high and high school, I was a computer nerd. In fact, I've always been into airplanes and computers, and pretty much my whole life, and nothing's ever changed. But I didn't know really where to start, and I didn't do any. I didn't do any computer science courses. Actually, I took one computer science course in college because we had to. I didn't like it. So, but I knew, like, I was like just playing around with computers, and of course playing games, but making movies and doing anything that you could do with a computer. I always liked it. But I didn't get into software development until the Swift language came out. And but once that came out, I watched that introduction. I can never remember the year. Was it
For
2009
14
or
for
20?
Swift?
Swift, yeah. Was
Yeah,
it
Swift 14.
20? Oh, I'm wait. Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I was just changing airlines. So anyway, I jumped in there, and because I thought, well, this is a new programming language. I can learn it with everybody else. I was kind of wrong about that because it's not like a new language means you have to relearn how to program all over again. You're just speaking a little bit different language, which I didn't know at the time. But so that was my starting point where I always sort of had this background of wanting to do software development, but I didn't know where to start. I tinkered around with Linux very briefly. I had a machine running Linux, or FreeBSD is what it was, but I didn't know what to do with it. Like, okay, well, here's a machine running FreeBSD, but what do I do now? So when Swift came out, I had an iPhone, and so I think Paul Hudson was probably one of my first books that I read, and all the YouTube videos, and everything that you do to teach yourself anything.
How did you know it was coming out? Like, were you
Well,
already looking into the tech scene or?
no, no. I watched. I always watched the keynote of WWDC when Steve Jobs was alive, and I loved watching that keynote and just seeing the new tech. Although I never watched anything else. I didn't watch the developer videos or anything, or all the other stuff. I just watched the
Yeah.
keynote. And so, when Swift was announced during WWDC during the keynote, that's how I knew it, and so that's where I got into it.
And so
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you said you started learning Paul Hudson's Swift.
Yeah, Paul Hudson, Sean Allen. Oh no, you're putting me on the spot. All the
No, no,
names,
it's fine. Yeah. No,
oh,
you don't
no,
have to name them
Jason,
all.
no, yeah, all the
Yeah.
iOS development. You just start
Yeah.
Googling Swift software development and what names come up and the way when I learned brewing to go back to that, I just bought every book and taught myself and I took some classes on how to do it and I know that I've always had the mindset that if you want to do something as a person you can learn it. If you have the desire to do whatever it is that you're enthusiastic about, you have the ability to learn it. And so I know that it's going to be hard. If it was easy, anybody would do it. That's a statement my wife makes with her running. She's a serial marathoner, and she said, "Well,
Yeah.
if it was easy, anybody would do it." But it's not going to be
It's true.
easy. But you can do it. And so I take that mindset and just like, okay, what can I learn? And even if reading things or listening to a podcast about software development, if you don't understand 90% of it, well, you've at least heard it. And then the next time you hear it, like, oh yeah, I heard that before. And you kind of learn things slowly that way. I didn't go through a traditional computer science program, but give yourself 7 years of focus and learning something and time to make all the mistakes, you're going to learn it. So.
And at the time, you said you had a full-time job, right, as a pilot.
Yes, yes. So I was a regional airline pilot for 16 years for a company called Horizon Air, and then I left Horizon and I went to a company called Virgin America, and so right around this time, there's my dates are fuzzy, but this is 2016. February of 2016 is when I was leaving Horizon, going to work at Virgin, and so doing that now I'm in training for another airplane, another airline, and I'm learning a new airplane, which at the time was the Airbus A320, and so I'm learning that. But I was actually for training. I was in San Francisco and I found myself a place to stay because the airline didn't pay for a hotel for training. So everybody had to find their own place to stay. And I found an Airbnb that was dubbed as a hacker house. And that's how I actually
Huh.
that's probably when I saw that. I'm like, oh, that's me, or I want to go there. And what was cool about that is during the day, I would go to the training center and learn all the airplane stuff and everything, aircraft systems, and then the simulator training and policies and procedures and everything of this new airline. But then at night, I go back to the Airbnb or the hacker house, and all these people are coming through. And this was in Burlingame area of San Francisco. So all these people are coming through, and they're staying there for some people just for a night or 2 nights, some for a week, some for months. And so I would just kind of chat with these people because this is a big house. And I would chat with them about what they were doing, what they were working on. They're all software developers coming from all over the world to San Francisco. And I remember one guy came in and he was working on a drone project that was managing fleets of drones. And this is 2016. And I always wonder, like, I wonder what he was building,
Yeah.
and what's in use now. Because you see these light shows that are done with all these drones. And this was a guy that was working on that. So it was really inspiring for me and a little bit of a break from the airline because the training was pretty intense. And so to come back and in the evenings and kind of just get to, talk to various software developers about what they're working on, that was cool. It was a good shift of gears. And I couldn't really speak the language yet, because I was kind of still at the time of, let name equal Dan, print name. And, I
Yeah.
wasn't really building apps yet, but it was a cool segue. So I can't remember where I was going with that, but full-time job and software, yes.
When do you feel like your development? When did it level up?
I think with my second app, I'll say that that first app that I put on the store, the Brewery Finder app, that wasn't it. I don't
What
think I
year was
really.
that? You
Um,
know?
let's say I'm gonna say late 2017, maybe early 2018. That sounds
Yeah.
right. But so again, my wife being a very enthusiastic runner, she's done 34 marathons as of today, countless half marathons, 5Ks, 10Ks. What she was doing for her training plans was printing out these training plans and then crossing off the days on paper. And I thought there's got to be a better
Yeah.
way to do that. And of course there is. There's a million running training apps out there, Couch to 5K or you name it. But it gave me a little bit of inspiration for my next app to do. I'm going to build an app that gives you a training plan backdated from the whatever marathon or half marathon that you're training for. So I kind of built it for her, but also that I had an expert right on hand that's an expert about running and marathons and training and everything. And then the other things that are kind of circle around that, you're going to take a picture of your finish line photo and what time did you get on your run. So this is what this app does. So I think when I released that app, and it's called Run Roster, I feel like that was a legitimate app that had a legitimate purpose for built for people that are doing this kind of thing. And then I use it myself. You know, I've done one marathon and a number of half marathons, and I still use it today for that. So I'd say I leveled up there. You know, it's got a little bit better UI and it's much more maintainable. The architecture is much cleaner. So
What helped you with that, getting to that place?
experience, I would say. Just I mean, a lot of false starts. I was working on some AR kit stuff, sprite kit. I was trying to make a game that was associated around like a little airplane flying game in AR. Because I always think like augmented reality is very cool. Of course, with the Vision Pro goggles coming out, that's going to be
Yeah.
next level stuff. But so a lot of false starts, misdirections. I'm sure that there was probably like three or four other apps that I was working on at the time, or little ideas that I'd had that never really went anywhere. So yeah, I think yeah, it's kind of a broad answer, but just to say experience, do something for running. Well, you're getting into Health Kit, right? With the running app,
Yeah.
because there's of course a watch portion, so I can go on a run, and my own app is running on my watch to track my heart rate and pace and everything, and of course there's a timer. But so you get into Health Kit and starting to focus on these frameworks, which I had from previous experience from the brewery app, which tracked, I use MapKit. So now I'm using MapKit again to show the running route. So you kind of build up your toolbox, if you will, on what
Yeah.
frameworks you've worked with. So just experience. You're not gonna execute something the first time and have it be great. It's going to be a version one. And actually, it probably should be a version 0.5 that you think is version one. But as you go ahead, you're like, oh man, that version one
Yeah.
was terrible, but hey, it's okay. It's your version one. So,
Yeah, it's always the cool part of having like a bunch of projects to
yep.
refer back to. Because
Mhm.
even though like when you wrote it, it was maybe your code is not that great, you can still take out parts of it, improve it, and then implement it in your current project, and
Yes,
it saves a lot of time.
it does. And I am very conscientious about that because I'm in my daily life. Like there's a lot happening in this scene that you see here. I've got a lot going on behind me, but you wouldn't know because I actually will throw things away. If I don't need something anymore, I get rid of it, give it away, give it to charity, throw it away. Stuff. I live kind of a minimalistic lifestyle. I think, except for what you see here behind me. But with my code, save that code. I try to save, little methods that I write. I try to save those code snippets or a little app that does something. I have a folder on my computer called Tiny Projects for Tiny Problems. So there'll be like these little apps that do one thing, and I
Yeah.
save that and I'll go back in and I'll look for those. Like, I know I've done this before, but you're not going to remember always what code you've written. So yeah, don't throw that away. You never know when you're going to need some piece of code that you wrote before, even if even if it needs improvement. I try to save my old code, much less everything else that I do.
Yeah. And how do you juggle that and also being a pilot? Like, how do you do that?
That's a great question, and it's time management is and using my downtime for software is how you do it, and it's not really easy, and it's one of the things that we do with our own podcast. you reached out to me about, talking about software and, in the podcast that we're doing myself with Veronica, one of the things we talk about on Jet Fuel Devs is if you have a full-time job, but you want to do software as well, you can do it. And here we're doing it, and this is how we're doing it. That's what we're trying to show in the podcast about how you juggle a full-time job and your own software development. It's not easy because it's, at the end of the day, like I think I posted a tweet, a post on the X platform recently about how I'd flown about 8.5 hours just the other day. And I get to the end, I was in Boston, and usually at the end of my workday, I'll fly the day, and whatever city I'm in, typically I can usually open up my laptop and get a couple of hours of work done. And I'll utilize that downtime that I have to get a little bit of code written. Some days I have more time. I can get 3-4 hours of work done on an overnight, or if I'm at home, I can get. The other day I was able to work on my code for about 5 hours. The house was empty, and I just sat down and worked on it. But some days I have an hour. That particular day, at the end of that long day of flying, I was tired. I'm tired, and I got no work done. I knew that I just didn't have the mental energy to do it. So recognizing when you're too tired to not write, just a bunch of bugs that day, but recognizing the time off that you have, the downtime that you have, and utilizing that time is important, to like, hey, I've got an hour here or there, or when can I set aside time that I'm not too tired, and knowing that you also have for me, I have a spool up time. Like it's going to take me 15-20 minutes to kind of get back into what I was doing the day before, on my code, to realize where I was, and then I get into the rhythm of things, and I can get more work done. But yeah, some days are better than others. Some days you get nothing done, and I just have to be okay with that, but understand that I do have a full-time job, and it's not every day is going to be super productive. And some days I get a lot of work done. Some days again, I get nothing done, but
Yeah.
it's okay.
Do you try to plan ahead? Like, it looks like I'll have a block of time during this day, so I'll do.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. So just to use this weekend as an example, tomorrow I'll fly to Seattle, and then because I commute out there on my own time, I'll be a passenger in the back of the airplane. So I can typically get a couple of hours. Well, I'll say an hour. It's a 3-hour flight. Out of that 3-hour flight, I'll probably get an hour worth of work done, maybe an hour and a half. I don't kid myself that I can just sit there and like hammer out code the whole time. I can't, but I try. And then the next day I'll be in Orange County, California, and I have most of the day there, because my flight will get into Orange County at like 10 in the morning, and I have just the rest of the day off. So that's an advantage with the airline job, is that when I'm in a city, sometimes, not all the time, you have a good portion of the day that you can get some work done. And you could do other things. You could go for a walk, you could see the city, you could I mean, people do whatever people do, but typically what I'll do is I'll take my laptop and either work in the hotel, or I go to a coffee shop. There's a great juice bar that I like to go to in San Diego. I've got my little places in various
Yeah.
cities around the country, that I can go to get some work done. I put my headphones on and just try to get some work done.
Yeah, it's really good. Like I try to do that myself, where I try to at least like plan the week ahead.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like in based on like
The
what's the priority that needs to get done.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, I forgot about the planning. So the planning for my days. That's the planning for my days. I started using an app called Linear, for my tasks, and it's just like what tasks do I have, with the current project, and then what bugs do I have. So that has really helped me a lot. I used to leave notes, and I still do. I leave notes in Xcode for where I left off, or little warnings about what bugs I need to sort out, which works. But this Linear app has really helped me to prioritize and be more efficient with what I'm doing, because I've set a personal deadline for the iOS 17 release date, which we don't know yet, but
Yeah.
sometime mid-September probably. So I've got a personal deadline to have this new app out by mid-September.
Well, hopefully you achieve that.
Hopefully I do. Yeah, yeah. We'll see. Now it's in video, so I do hope to achieve it. But I'm building it off of iOS 17, the new Swift data. I really appreciate Swift data because my other apps use core data, and I've always struggled with core data, just the architecture of it. And Swift data to me makes a lot more sense, and so I'm using that, which is a big reason why I'm targeting iOS 17 for this app, and it's a brand new app, so I can. And it's just me, so I don't have a project manager telling me what iOS version we need to target. It's just I'm the project manager.
And you said you're using a linear app, right? It's like a phone app,
It's
or
a
is it what kind of
no,
app
it's
is
a
it?
Mac app.
Oh,
I
it's a
just had to
Mac app.
look at it's a Mac app. I don't know if it's on the phone. I don't use it.
Yeah.
If it is an iOS app, yeah, it's just there's other project managing apps, but yeah, it just very nice way of organizing a list and then prioritizing by whether it's a bug, it's a feature, or an improvement to an app, the difficulty level. If you want to put a deadline on it, you can put that in. It's just yeah, for me, it helps me I've been more productive using that app because a lot of times, because I have my full-time job and then my home life and everything I'm doing around the house, like if it's been a day since I've worked on my project, I will like, okay, where did I leave off? And so Linear has helped me to say this is the priority, and I can go in and mark top priority, and then notes about what the bug is or what the feature is that I'm working on.
Something you mentioned earlier, by the
Mhm.
way, that the past 2 years you've started to take the iOS development more seriously.
Yes.
Have you thought about like making the leap and like going full time with iOS?
Yes, absolutely. I have. I didn't initially. Years ago when I started, it was just something to challenge me and something to keep my mind busy. Like I'm the type of person that I have to have some project. My wife could tell you this directly as well, that I have to keep my mind particularly busy. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm not doing anything. I feel like I'm not being productive, and I don't feel satisfied in my day if I didn't get something done. And what does get something done mean? It changes for everybody, I think.
Yeah.
But initially, when I started this, it was just something to keep my mind busy, to feel like I'm learning, to feel like I'm doing something with my time. And aviation is great. I've done it my whole life. I've started flying when I was 14. I'm currently 45. I'm almost 46. Um, but the funny thing about aviation and particularly the airlines is the airplanes don't change. Policies and procedures, they do change, but they change slowly because making changes to policies or to designs, procedures, it has to be considered very carefully because that's where accidents happen. So which is good for safety, but for the mind, it's not very good. Like once you learn an airplane, once you've been in an airline for a few years, there's not a whole lot that really changes. And you could have another pilot on here and say like, well, you could get into the details of, the approach construction. You could get really into the weeds on aerodynamics and that's very true, absolutely. But as a regular, as a line pilot, I call myself, just the day in day out of work, it it doesn't change, and that's for a reason. It's for safety, and for me mentally, that's not very stimulating. Okay, like the airplane is the same, and so I need something else to stimulate me mentally, and software and the constant change and evolution of software and hardware is I love that challenge that brings you because like if you're learning something now, it's yeah. I mean, I guess you could stagnate. I'm sure a lot of developers stagnate in their careers and they always stick to you know one language. But if you choose not to, you can always be evolving with the current technology, and so I really like that. And for that reason, one of my recent changes in mentality is that I would like to somewhat pivot away from the airlines, or pare back my flying and increase my. Of course, everybody wants to increase their app sales, but I
Yeah.
would like to reduce my flying and supplement that income with app sales. What I don't have the desire to do right now is just start applying for iOS jobs or software development jobs in general because I thought about that. I thought, well, I've done this. I've been doing professional flying for 23 years. I've seen that. I've seen that movie. I like to say I know what the movie how this goes, and it's a great career. Don't get me wrong. It's you can't complain about that this kind of a career, but I've done it. I've been here. I've seen it. And I've thought about applying for a job at a software development company, but I also thought, well, maybe I would just fall into the same trap that I'm just working for somebody else. I'd much rather do an independent thing, be my own boss, and create what I want to create. And if I can make a go of that financially, that's awesome. If I can't, well, I'm in a pretty good position anyway.
You mentioned really two really good things there. Like as a software developer, it's like constantly changing and you always have to be learning. And as you said, you don't have to, but I feel like that's the standard if you want to be like good at it. Like you need to constantly be learning and
Yep.
evolving as these languages and softwares evolve themselves.
Right.
And the
Yep.
second thing you mentioned was like entrepreneurship. That's another
Yes.
big thing. And I feel like that's something that I wrestled with too, like working at a full-time job or going out and doing doing something on my own where I could support myself and actually create
Right.
something that's beneficial to people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very inspiring, right? Like, I mean, I think that creating something for a large company, whether that is like you had a hand in creating that thing that's going to reach millions, tens of millions potentially of people, but as a solo entrepreneur, this is your thing. This is it's kind of part of your identity, I would say. This product that you put out, this podcast that you do, this is all part of your identity in a way. And for me, that's very inspiring. And I don't think everybody's an entrepreneur, but if that inspires you, then I always encourage people to do it because if putting yourself out there can be kind of scary, but it's also to me, it's very fulfilling. I do get fulfillment out of, strangely, even after all these years, 23 years of flying people around the country, I still enjoy the fact that I can get people from A to B, that I had some little part in that. Even if the flight is 2 hours late, I don't enjoy it as much, but it's like, I still like that. I like getting people from point A to point B, but I get more fulfillment out of the little things that I can create that I came up with, that I created in software, I turned into an app, put out there. This podcast that Veronica and I have been doing has been very fulfilling, trying to, create something, put something out in the world that people enjoy and hopefully be an inspiration to people. Which is what I see, exactly what you're doing. I mean, you just quit your job. I just
Yeah.
watched that video that
Yeah.
you did. I mean, that's got to be scary, but also inspiring to you. It also kind of like lights a candle, to get you, if you lacked
Yeah.
any motivation before, you better have it now.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd say I'm pretty fortunate where like I'm young, I don't have that many financial responsibilities and
Right.
responsibilities in general.
Mhm.
So I have like some a little bit of freedom and I felt like the real risk was like staying, especially at a place where I saw there was no future and like room for me to grow.
Right. Yeah. What, I don't know. I don't know if I have this question fully formed, but like, I don't know what my 5-year plan is, but like, what's your 5-year plan? If I can give you that
Uh,
standard pitch, what,
yeah.
what, what do you think your 5-year plan is?
Well, to continue to learn and iterate
Mhm.
and see basically just learn and iterate and see what works and doesn't work
Okay.
and
Yeah.
lean into what works
Sure. Sure.
and yeah, and try to
Do,
enjoy it
do,
of course.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully. Do you see yourself? Are you looking for like a content creator direction, or a software creator direction, or a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both to be honest. Like
No.
it's tough because like kind of like what I just said, like it's depending on what works and what I enjoy most. And yeah, like even with this podcast, like I really enjoy podcasting, and I was doing it before, actually, before like I started
Yeah.
this one.
Mhm.
And even though it's not like technically development,
Sure.
I still enjoy it, and that's kind of the thing I wrestle with. Like, what if what succeeds is not something that revolves around like actually coding and like developing?
Well,
Yeah,
but that's it's what you enjoy, right?
yeah,
You know, one of the things that talking to people that I used to have a meetup group, right? And because when I started developing and in my early day, I was in Southern California quite a bit when I was based in Los Angeles, and I was on reserve, and I joined a meetup group there. And I was able to talk to these other developers in the area, and then when I was no longer in Southern California so much, being in Minnesota, living here, there was nothing here that there wasn't a meetup group that really did what I was, what I found in Southern California, where people would get together and just work on code, and they'd ask each other questions, and being an independent developer, you're just writing software on your own. And so that this is one of the problems that I face is like, I know how I write code, but I can read blogs and watch tutorials or watch YouTube videos about whatever, but I don't really see the full architecture of it. And so it was something that I was missing, was working with other people and writing code. And so what I learned from being in Southern California and working with people and talking with people is especially independent developers that are new to the field, is people don't know where to start. And you asked me about where did I get my start, and then where did I feel like I leveled up. And I always tell people to what do you know about? There's something that you know about. Like, you've done a podcast before, so you can do a podcast again, and you take what you learned from before and you apply it to what you're doing now. And I think that same thing applies with software. Even if you've just got out of a boot camp or something and you don't know what to make first, if you're just doing an independent thing, well, you did something before, you have previous knowledge from something, and take that previous knowledge and apply it to what you're doing now, no matter what you're into. So, and yeah, like you say, lean into what works. If content creator is what works, then hell yeah, lean into it. That's awesome.
What about yourself? What are you looking?
What's my 5-year plan?
Yeah,
I would love to um, get have an app on the store that actually produces some sort of a sustainable revenue, where I could draw from that in a way that I could pare back on my flying a bit. Because one of the things that wears on a pilot is the lifestyle. And a flight attendant as well. We live similar lifestyles, where you're the same lifestyle, where you're just on the road a lot. You're away from home a lot. And I'd like to be away from home less, because you just miss so much. And my kids are older. I have a 21-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old son, and my daughter moved out. She's on her own in an apartment. So there's when the kids are young, and you're a young family, and that can be very difficult when you're gone so much. You miss so much. But even still, with the kids being older, you still miss things around the house, so around family and everything. And so I would like to miss less. Um, and so my 5-year plan is to miss less.
yeah,
This app I'm working on is a fueling app that manages fuel for small airports. And this idea came to me from a coworker, actually, who owns a small, actually a fairly good sized flight school. And he was telling me about how the problems that they have with just tracking fuel, and how all of it is done on paper. And this blew my mind. I didn't know that this was a problem. But apparently the software, or any software that is out there currently to manage fuel, is thousands of dollars a month. And so I'm just trying to take it from the standpoint of can I make an app that's better than paper? That's my 1.0. Is it better than using paper? And so that's my starting point. And in 5 years, if that app is still running, if it's way better than paper and every iterate and improve and execute and make it even better and sustainable, to have some sort of an income where I can retract the amount of flying that I have to do every month, would be awesome.
And what resources do you have you looked into to improve that? Because I think of that as well. Like for the apps, like I kind
Mhm.
of think of it as like the business side of it, where you have to figure out like the marketing and how you want to push this, who you want to target, and all that.
Yes, right. So that's kind of the next level, of leveling up. I think in the beginning, and I'm still definitely, I consider myself a junior developer, for sure. I worked with a team, briefly during the pandemic, because there wasn't much flying, and so I was helping out a friend of mine working on an app, and there was myself, two other developers, and there was actual designers, and that was a really cool experience. But I'm still very much a junior developer, I would say. And then, so that's one level. But another level is, okay, I know that I can create an app that, piece of software that pretty much does whatever you can come up with. That might be saying a lot, maybe not everything, but I know that I can create apps. So I'm beyond that part, way past tutorials, and you know, rather than downloading a sample project, read the documentation. And so my software development skills are enough where it's time to move on to the next level, which is the marketing business side of it. And so, okay, how do you do that? And that's something that you can tell with my own apps and the marketing on the App Store. The associated websites that they may have, are all very slim and are very basic. When I went to that software developer conference, Deep Dish Swift, last year, that was a huge resource, in the next level of app development, which is not writing the code. Obviously, there's software, coding, discussions and presentations, but there was a lot of things not associated with that. It was more about marketing your apps and the business side of things, and the networking, of course. And so, that's a huge resource. If your listeners have never done this, it's expensive, especially as just a person. Most people there at the conference had been sent by their companies, or they were independent developers, and their own businesses have paid for their travel, the time there, the hotel, the food, the ticket. These are expensive things, but so I definitely didn't take it lightly. But the experience, even if you can do it one time, is so worth it because of the amount of knowledge that you get, well beyond that of just your software development skills. It's so worth it to go to a conference, to talk to people, learn how to market, App Store optimization in the iOS world. And I mean, this is a whole nother level of the business side that you have to specifically look for that,
Yeah,
in the YouTube or whatever,
yeah,
to get that information.
yeah. And I feel
So
like that's
that's
something as developers that we don't really focus on because we like to build and code, right? So
right. Yep. Yep. Sean Allen does a great job of, he's very open. He's always been very public about what he does with his work, with his YouTube channel, with his Creator View app. He's very public about the how he markets it and how he builds it. And I've always appreciated that because it's not talked about very much. And I wish that it was, because you might have the most amazing app in the world, but if you put it on the store and you can't do your
yeah,
keywords right, nobody's going to find it. It's just, it's tough. It's a whole nother skill set in a way. I mean, this is a full-time job, marketing. So
yeah,
in the skill set, like design, I'm terrible at design. I'm trying to get better, but these are just things that you improve. So yeah, if you can get to a developer conference, for your listeners, that's a huge resource to do. As far as my software development skills, what resources? I mean, it's books, tutorials, well, not, YouTube channels, blogs, the documentation, the WWDC videos are awesome. But design wise, I downloaded a Udemy course on design. I think I got like 3 or 4 course lessons into it. I haven't done anything since. You know, I'm trying to level up my design
Yeah,
skills, but it's like that's a whole nother. You know, that's a huge discipline. I really envy
yeah,
people that have that skill and they can write the code. That's a huge skill set to have. I don't have it
that
quite
is.
yet.
Dang it, yeah, those are like the three. Those are three pillars. I don't know if there's any more, but yeah, those three, like business, coding, and then like the design.
Yeah, yeah, it's huge. When I was working on that project in 2020 with a small team, you know, the design team sends a whole storyboard and every screen, every the flow. Oh, that is huge. It's just like, okay, code this up, make it work. Okay, I can do that, you
Yeah.
know. But to come up with that on my own, oh, that's hard, and I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
So.
Do you have you used tools like Dribble?
Yep. I have got that as a definitely a bookmark. You know, looking at design ideas. I use Sketch. I know a lot of people talk about like with Swift UI and the previews and just designing in the previews, writing Xcode. I do that. It's kind of a balance. Like with my current app project Profueler, I still have built out a good number of the screens and the flow of it in Sketch, and then I find that I'm much more effective at iterating on it if I do that first. That's just for me personally. I'm not quite there where I can say, oh, I'm just going to design this in Xcode. Like I think I can take a much higher level view of the whole app if I build out the screens and everything in Sketch first. So I'm trying to think what other tool. Yeah, but design ideas. You know, with Instagram, I follow some design. You know, see pictures, screenshots of little ideas. So
Also, just
there's
checking out other apps too, right? That's a good
yes.
inspiration.
Yes, Flighty, the Flighty app for flight tracking. They have a great design. The way that they promote their pro features, they're up. You know the paywall.
Paywall.
Their paywall is pretty aggressive. Like I think just about every time you launch the app, they present their paywall. But then within the app, they'll show like, well, you know, here's a pro feature that's blurred out. That's a great one. PCalc. PCalc, the calculator, is inspiring. Not necessarily the design, but that's a calculator app that does so many other things. It's almost comical. It's just this is an app that is way beyond what a calculator is or should be. But that was actually an inspiration for my app Run Roster, where I wanted to do a bunch of little things, and it's nowhere near the level of what PCalc. But yeah, whether it's functionality or design, look at your favorite app and what do you like or what don't you like about it.
Yeah, and for like marketing stuff, yeah, you mentioned earlier like App Store optimization. Looking into that is very important. There's a
Yes.
few people on Twitter who talk about it, and they also have like YouTube channels.
Yes.
App
Yep.
Figures, and
Yep.
there's another one by Steve Young. I forgot what it's called.
Yep.
But those
Yep.
are some really good resources to look in.
Yes. Yeah. App Figures is great. I met Ariel from App Figures at in Chicago. In fact, it was the night before the conference, and I didn't even know who he was. I learned later. I'm like, oh, you're that guy. But he looked at he's oh pull up your app on the App Store, and he looked at my app on the store listing for Run Roster. He looked at it for 5 seconds. It's like, okay, this here's a problem, here's a problem, here's a problem. I mean, he just right away, and all these problems, But in the beginning, you just trying to get your app out there. Just does it
Yeah.
work? It's on the store. Great. Why is nobody downloading it? Well, they can't find it. And so especially with a running app, I mean, I'm going up against Nike and all the running companies,
Yeah.
but it's not a great target market, but I still like it. I still have fun with it. No, I enjoy maintaining that app and using it myself.
Now I want to transition into how did your podcast start? Because it's an interesting podcast. Like it's you and what Vic is it Vic
Veronica.
Veronica,
Yep.
sorry. Veronica,
Yes. Yeah.
she's a flight attendant as well, and you're a pilot, and both you guys are into software.
Yes.
So how did that happen?
Yeah, that's so I've been following Veronica since I think 2020, when I just found her on Twitter, and so following her there, and it was, I don't know when it was. It was a few months ago, that she sent out a tweet saying, "Does anybody want to host a Twitter space, live spaces, for something?" I can't remember what it was, and I was like, "I'll do it. Sure, let's do it." And so that's kind of how it started. We just hosted a Twitter space together, and then we did one more, and I think in between all of that, we just with the communication there. Started talking a bit more like, well, why don't we turn this into a podcast? And I had done a podcast in the past, many years ago, about what it was like to be in the aviation industry, and just what your daily life was. So I had a little bit of experience with that. But it had been a long time when I was doing my podcast. It was called Hotel Coffee. I was, it was at a time where if I said I have a podcast, people would say, "What's a podcast?" It was like that
What
early.
year was this?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that.
Yeah.
Let's see, 2005 or six.
Dang, yeah.
I still have the files. I didn't throw those away, but so I had a little bit of experience. But Veronica is with her lifestyle. So she lives in Dubai, and then is flying all over the world. She's going to university studying computer science. So she has a great perspective on time management. She's incredibly motivated. I haven't met somebody. You don't meet many people, I don't feel, that are so motivated that I mean, she's got more things going on than I do, and I feel like I have a lot going on with flying and software. I mean, she has all of that and then some, and she'll say, "I have plan A, plan B, plan C," and she's got all these
Yeah.
different things that she's doing, and it's to meet somebody like that and to work with somebody like that is really inspiring. So in those couple of Twitter spaces that we did, you get some of that inspiration and that enthusiasm, and it's for me it's inspiring to work with somebody like that, and she's very well organized, but we also talk a lot about being real with yourself, that hey, sometimes you're tired, like we talked about in the beginning, that we can't you don't want to burn out, because I've been there. I'm sure she's been there. You reach burnout phase where you're just doing too much. And so that's why we do the podcast once a month, because we've got our full-time jobs. But the balance of that inspiration of wanting to create something, she has that. We know the lifestyle, but we have, she has an international type of schedule where she's flying, around the
Yeah.
globe. I mean, she just flew from San Francisco back to Dubai, and I only fly domestic. So those are two different kind of lifestyles in the airline industry. So, we can relate, but then there's also differences because we do, work somewhat of a different kind of job, or different level of the job, if I could say that. And then with her computer science degree that she's working on, I don't have that perspective, so she has that perspective, and it's cool for me to hear what she's learning about, because I never learned about those things. I think one of the classes she's doing right now is just is the business side of software, and like that's like we were just talking about, that's
Yeah.
extremely valuable. So so that's how the podcast started, and again, we want to tell people that you can do something for your job, but you can manage yourself, and to seek that thing that you love to create, to do that. And we're doing it. This is how we're doing it. This is, watch us do it. And we, that's kind of what we feel like what jet fuel development is just get out there and create something with your time, because you have it. You really do.
The listeners should definitely go check out the Jet Fueled Dev podcast, right?
Yes. Jet fuel devs. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Yep.
listened to a few episodes and it's really good. Like you guys hit on good topics and you guys have really good takeaways.
Yeah, yeah. We episode 4 we're recording today. One of the things that I think Veronica sent me a video about this, content creation. What do we talk about? Because if you, again, with burnout, is like, well, okay, what subject matter are you going to discuss? What's your niche, or what's your interest level, or focus. And this video, I might be able to find it, but it was like, come up with 10 topics, or maybe it was 20 topics of what you're going to do for your podcast, and just titles or ideas of what you're going to do before you even start recording episode one. Do you have 10 different episodes in mind? Even just a bullet point list of something. And that was really good. I have 10. I use ChatGPT,
Yeah.
to give me 10 things. And then it spit out a list, all these different ideas. And so I go down the list and I'm like, okay, well, I would change that, but and that one, like, that's a dumb idea, and that's a dumb idea, and that's a good idea, but I'm going to change the kind of some of the bullet points. So that's actually what I did to come up with for podcast ideas, because I think in time, what is the message? What is your product, if you will? What's the message you're trying to deliver, and what value? Veronica talks a lot about that. You have to deliver some sort of value for your listeners, for your audience,
Yeah.
that can take something away from it. So we focus on that as well.
Yeah, that's super important.
Again, she's very yeah, she's got a great mind for the direction of the podcast and what we're working on. But we'll get on a call. I was on a call with her this morning about, like, okay, what's next? And
Yeah.
we've got our next episode, but then also, okay, what other things are we working on? We launched a website. We've got a couple of other things that we're working on as well. And being able to kind of, you've got to be able to work with somebody. And sometimes you don't really know, but the couple of Twitter Spaces that we did, these few podcast episodes that we've done, Veronica is very she's very driven and hardworking. So it's inspiring again, and I feed off of that.
Yeah, like I checked out the podcast, and I also, like, I was looking at your guys' like profiles on social media. And yeah,
Mhm.
she has a really dope mindset. Like, she has a strong mindset.
Yeah, yeah, she's very hard worker. Yeah, but for the future, for right now, I'm gonna keep doing the podcast. I've got my new app that I'm Pro Fueler, that I hope to release in mid-September. I have a bunch of ideas for Run Roster, my other app I've got improvements that I want to make. I want to add new features, but I'm really trying to maintain focus on this fueling app that for this deadline that I've set for myself. Like, no, I can't jump around too much, otherwise I just get nothing done. So I'll just focus on this thing, and then I'll get that released, and then the next job will begin. Will be marketing it, and I've already kind of worked on that. I actually physically went out to the airport that I learned to fly at initially, is just about an hour away from me now, and I went out to that airport, just this little airport, and I talked to the owner of the local flight school there, and I showed him my kind of a beta, or definitely a beta, maybe an alpha of my fueling app. I showed him what I'm trying to do, and he said, he gave me great feedback too about what they do for their business, and I just physically went to the door and talked to the people that are doing it, because I'm not in that world, as in the airlines, I don't have anything to do with the fuel ordering or anything. So I was like, I need to talk to some people that are in this world of this product that I'm trying to create for this market, and how do you do that?
Yeah,
So
talking to customers is fundamental, to be honest. Like, when starting for starting a
yeah,
business, and if you want to create an app that it's going to be a source of income, then it's basically starting a business. So it's
yeah.
something that, like, super vital.
Yeah, totally. And I can't, with Run Roster, I can dog food that app, right? Like, I use my own app myself, and so then in using it, I can see problems and whatnot. But I can't really dog food a fueling app. I can't go out to an airport and start fueling airplanes and using the app. I have a somewhat of an idea, because I did do that when I was in college. I worked at an airport and operated a fuel truck, but it's been a lot of years. So there's things are changes. There's changes that have happened, and the market research is another aspect of the app, and that's what I'm touching on now. I haven't gotten super deep into it, but I am touching on that.
And what would you say is more difficult, or was more difficult for you, learning iOS development or becoming a pilot or learning how to fly?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, I think yeah, is it a cop out to say both? Because they both have their own challenges. They're both hard. I mean, initially, it's when you first learn to fly, it's you learn to drive. You're driving in two dimensions, right? You're going forward and backward and side to side. Okay, right? So when you're flying, you're going forward and backward. Well, you're not going backward much. You hope not, but and side to side and up and down. So now you're learning in three dimensions. You're operating in three dimensions, and that was a difficult. That was an interesting concept to grasp. That you don't just have to think, okay, where am I now and where am I going? You're also thinking that where you're going might be below you or it might be above you, and thinking of that and energy management, and then so there's a lot to learn with aviation, and especially in the beginning, if you don't fly on a regular basis, three times a week minimum, you can overfly. You can fly too much where you're just so tired, you're not learning, you're just exhausted. So you can't. I don't think you should fly 7 days a week, but if you don't fly more than once a week, once every 2 weeks, you're rusty. And every time you come back to the airport and every time you fly, you're having to, what I call pull cobwebs out of your brain to remember, like, oh yeah, this is how you do that, and this is what happens next, and everything. And I think software is very similar, and I try to write code, even if my day is, if a work day is really busy, or my home life is, if there's, I mean, there's other things going on around the house, of course, and I try to be present at home. But I try to write software, or at least look at my code, try to look at something every single day, because if I don't look at it for a couple of days, then you got to pull those cobwebs out. So there's similarities with both disciplines where you want to stay fresh on everything, because otherwise you're starting over every time, and it's not an efficient way to learn, and an efficient way to build something if you're trying to create something.
And flying a plane or learning how to fly is pretty scary, right? Or
Well, initially, yeah. There's especially the airplane that I first started flying, that I got my private pilot's license in, was called a Piper Tomahawk. And it's this little tiny two-seater. I mean, it's me and the flight instructor. We're just both right here, and you're just this little tiny plane, and you look out and at this little wing that's holding up the whole thing, and it's like, oh, it can be a bit unnerving to be in the sky, and you're going to have to put the thing back on the ground. Of course, you have a flight instructor next to you that knows what they're doing, but it doesn't take very long. You only have I can't remember what it was, 40 hours, or there's some minimum time. I think I had 60 hours of flight time when I first soloed. So to take an airplane up by yourself for the first time, I think I had 60 hours. I was 16 at the time, so that's a long time ago. It was 30 years ago almost. But that's a little bit scary. But you've done it. They train you, and you're trained to handle the airplane and emergency procedures as well.
what's it like at first? Because, like, for example, like the first time you drive a car,
Mhm.
someone's like in the passenger, right? But they don't necessarily have control of the car
Right, right,
because the stakes aren't that high depending on where you
right.
are. But like
Mhm.
with the plane, how does that work?
Well, again, so at first, of course, you have a flight instructor with you. So, and then, like you say, there's dual controls.
It's
So the
dual
flight instructor
controls.
can
Yeah.
take over at any time. There's yeah, dual controls. So just like the airline, we've got controls on each side, and I fly one flight, the captain will fly the other. I'm a first officer, so the captain will fly one leg, and then I'll fly the next leg, and that's how we balance the flying and the radios and everything. But I digress. But at first, they just it's like with software, like let name equal Dan, print name, right? Like you just the basics. So your first flight is you're kind of just basically a passenger with some privileges of being able to operate the controls for a little bit, and they're going to
Yeah.
teach you the basics, the basic print statements, if you will, of okay, we're in level flight. We're going to maintain altitude. All you need to do is maintain altitude. Don't drift up, drift down, And you'd be amazed, as soon as you grab those controls the first time, you're probably going to pull, which is going to cause you to go up. And just out of tension, nervousness, excitement, the first response, natural response of a human is to pull back, and which causes the airplane to go up. Your airspeed is going to drop down, and if you do that enough, the airplane's going to stall, and you're going to, your app will crash, a runtime error. So, but they start you out very basic. Okay, don't climb. Watch your airspeed. Watch your altitude. And they really hold your hand. They really walk you through it. And just like anything, over time, you can maintain altitude. Now you can maintain altitude and turn. Now descend and maintain airspeed, because naturally in a descent, airspeed wants to increase, so you've got to pull the power back. You start building on these layers of knowledge that just the natural learning process. So I think that learning process, building those layers, probably takes the fear out of it, because you're too busy. You're busy. You're busy learning to fly.
Yeah.
I used to when I got home from my flying lessons initially, I'd go home and I'd go to bed. I'd take a nap because I was just mentally tired from everything, and I'd nap for a half hour, an hour or something. I remember doing that. So it now, after doing it basically my whole life, I mean, I might be tired just because it was a 12-hour day. But and there might be, there's there are flights that are more challenging than others. If there's a lot of weather along the route, summertime right now in the U.S., there's thunderstorms, and things, or if there's mechanical problems with the airplane, or we have passenger issues. All these things kind of layer on to be a mental challenge.
What's the hardest part? Is it the landing? I've heard the landing. Is that the hardest, or?
Yeah, I mean, the takeoff is just give it the gas and get enough airspeed and go. That's drastically simplifying it. But the landing is yeah, I'd say that's the hardest physical part. I'm trying to adjust my perspective of somebody that hasn't done it,
Yeah.
for 23 years. But it's for me, the landing is the fun part, especially if there's a bit of if there's some wind. It's maybe it's a crosswind. That's fun. It's a good challenge. Although now I'll retract that statement and say too much of that is then it's exhausting, and it's can be kind of a pain. Like, I wish it wasn't snowing sideways right now and the runway's covered in snow. That's not fun. I'll add an asterisk to my statement, but yeah, it's the most challenging part. But you have other challenges, in the airline. Your challenge is we look at route efficiency, fuel efficiency, of course, passenger comfort. If you're turning right, did you just crank the airplane over and turn right really hard? That's going to scare people. It might be fun for you as a pilot because you like to, be a pilot, but that's not what you're there for. You're there to provide a comfortable ride and get people where they want to go without really noticing. I like to joke that people forget that they're in an airplane. They think they're in a coffee shop with their cup of coffee and their Wi-Fi
Yeah.
on the plane, until the Wi-Fi breaks, and then like, oh yeah, sorry, or it's turbulent, and like, yeah, you are in an airplane. It is traveling at almost the speed of sound, so maybe watch out for the turbulence. But yeah, anyway, it's there's a lot of aspects.
Well, that's really cool. And thank you again for coming on the show. I really enjoyed the conversation. We talked about a lot. Where can the people find you?
So on the platform formerly known as Twitter, X, you can find me at O'Leary Dan, Oleary Dan, D-A-N, and also jetfueldevs.com, the Jet Fuel Devs podcast. We're also on Twitter at Jet Fuel Devs, the X platform. Instagram, Jet Fuel Devs, and you can follow Veronica Markova on the X platform as well.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of the iOS Dev Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you guys like, comment, share, subscribe, and consider sending this to a fellow developer. If you want to support the show, you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and even consider joining the Patreon.